Hello everyone and good afternoon. Sorry for the technical issues here. Welcome to the first of our seminar series here at the Storytelling Academy, home to the UNESCO Chair of Storytelling Education for Sustainability. I am your host, David Husseini. This seminar series is about how storytelling shapes our understanding of the world and how this is connected to public, health, education, and of course, environment, and how we can convey our messages more impactfully to the people with the help of storytelling. Today I am honored to be joined by Professor Ruth from University of Birmingham. One of her research areas is about social media storytelling. It's the study of stories that we share online and how that impacts others and how that creates connection, relatability. One of her recent research is about the impact of mental health influences on a platform called TikTok. I'm pretty sure some of you or most of you are familiar with that platform. And how these stories impact its user base and the audience. Today, she's going to share some of her findings to us, as well as the role of mental health literacy in social media storytelling. Please join me in welcoming her, Professor Ruth Page. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I assume that most of the people in the room use social media platforms to a degree and share some personal stories or maybe work-related stories in LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Could you tell us, please, for the people who might be new to the topic, what happens when we share our stories online in these platforms?
Well, there are lots of things going on when we tell a story. There are choices that we're making in terms of how we are constructing events, how we're constructing our identity, in terms of the choices that we're making, both in terms of the words that we're using and in terms of the visual choices that we might be making. So there's some work in terms of the actual artifact that is being created, but there's much more than that that's going on. There's technologically lots of things going on in terms of broadcasting to a range of known and unknown imagined audiences. There are possibilities for the content then to be shared, reshared, and so on and so forth. There are also interesting things going on in terms of what that does to our perception of ourselves to other people, the kind of connections that it makes possible. And also there are really interesting and difficult questions to wrestle with in terms of what does that mean in terms of the architecture, design, data, metadata that are in the different sites that we might be using when we're sharing those stories. So maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it a little bit today, but I'm really interested in the context of TikTok and for the point of view of the audience that are here today in terms of what those design features are doing in terms of enabling people to think or not think so critically about what they're sharing or not sharing and why they consume or don't consume particular kinds of mental health content online.
Definitely, we're going to talk about that. We're going to discover that area a bit further. But the first thing that I'm going to ask is that why mental health literacy has become such a huge topic for social media storytelling, and what is the relationship between storytelling and mental health literacy in these platforms?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I would say actually in terms of the research literature, there isn't a huge amount that brings together the concepts of mental health literacy and storytelling. It came about in our project, so the project that you see on the screen here that I'm currently leading, it comes to an end in a few months' time. This project came about because I was really keen that the research that I did should make a difference in the real world to people, especially young people. I'm really, really passionate about the young people that I teach. I have 2 adult children, lots of young people around me, and I became really passionate about, okay, how can I do something with the research that I do, which is about storytelling, help do something positive for them. And so in the preparation for this grant, what we did was actually go out and talk to different groups of young people. So we went to schools, I talked to different groups of students. I said, tell me about your social media experience. We actually used some design-based thinking tools in the focus groups that we ran, and what came out of that was very much a concern about their social media, what it was doing in terms of their mental health, but for them, influencers were a part of that landscape that was important to them. So that's the story behind how this grant then came about. I hope, maybe, I have a slide that shows you everybody who's involved in this. Maybe I don't. We will see. Let me just... click. No, I don't. Let me just stick with that now. So in this project, trying to bring together mental health literacy and storytelling was partly a conversation between my colleagues who lead on the psychology work in this project and those of us who are linguists on this project, which are myself and my colleague Alex Christensen. So for those of you who are not familiar with mental health literacy as a concept, it includes being able to identify different conditions, understanding of mental illness and distress. It involves being able to understand how to promote positive mental health outcomes. It involves attitudes towards mental health, and it includes help-seeking intentions. So these four components of mental health literacy join hands with storytelling in various ways, because storytelling is both this process by which we are conveying information in the form of how do we package people and the experiences that they have, but what is that doing in terms of our perception of each other, the kind of identity work that might be doing, how that positions people within different kinds of discourses, and how does it facilitate connection between each other. So there's two components of mental health literacy in terms of information and understanding of what mental health conditions, issues, challenges might be and how they're narrated. That kind of joins hands. And then the sense about attitudes, perception, stereotyping, stigma, that joins hands very much with the interpersonal aspect of storytelling. The bit that storytelling doesn't do so well is the bit about help-seeking and what that storytelling might or might not do in terms of facilitating a person who's hearing a story about mental health in particular. What does that do to their likelihood of seeking help? To the best of my knowledge, and you can tell me if I'm wrong and point me to the literature, I'd be very happy if you did, to work that begins to join those two things up. So I would say there's a real interest in mental health and mental health literacy because it's the mental health crisis. I don't like to use that word, but it is true, the amount of mental health challenges that young people and people within the UK are experiencing is significant. Storytelling is one way that we can understand both how people are receiving and interacting with contents about that. We know that 1 in 3 young people will turn to social media for mental health support. What we don't know is where do the kind of stories, especially the stories that are told by influencers, where does that sit within that landscape? What do young people do with that? What do those stories look like? Yeah.
So that begs the question. So basically, I'm pretty sure a lot of people tell us their stories, or a lot of people try to seek help in these platforms. But not all the contents get attention. Some content and some specific people get attention. I'm specifically talking about the influences. Who are the influences in these platforms? How do you identify them?
Very good question. And whenever you write an academic article about social media influence, I was like, so how are you defining social media influencer? So we define social media influencers in our project as internet or persona, people, figures who have gained high visibility because of their interactions within social media. So we are not including celebrities who already had visibility and came into social media. We are interested in those figures who have built visibility within social media itself. If you go onto a site like TikTok today and you type in mental health and influencer, you will find out there are different kinds of influencers in there. And you'll find that they've got different levels of followers. So in our data, we've got a kind of 3-way set of influencers who vary according to 2 parameters. One is the number of followers they had at the point of our data collection. So we have influencers who are about 10,000 followers and above. We have influencers who are 100,000 followers and above. And then we have influencers who are 1 million followers and above. And we have mental health influencers that fall into 3 categories. So we have influencers who have credentials or claim to be in professions where they are recognised mental health professionals, so they might be psychologists, psychiatrists, they might be therapists. We also have a category of data of influencers who are in the wellness, alternative health space, So these might identify as nutritionists, dietitians, life coaches, yoga coaches. And then we have a category of influencers who we would describe as experts by lived experience. So these are people who are sharing their experiences of working their way through different kind of mental health issues and challenges online. They do not claim to have a professional status. Now we know that there is a little bit of overlap. Of course, it is possible. There are figures like Dr. Alex George, for example, who is a professional. He is a medical doctor. He also has lived experience of mental health challenges. So we do have one or two in our data set who belong to both categories, but broadly that is how we have positioned the three types of influence. So in terms of defining it, it's to do with not having fame and status before you got into social media, the number of followers, and then within our data set particularly, the way that people orientate to that mental health experience.
You briefly mentioned that, like for example, one of these influencers, when they want to tell stories about themselves and their mental health challenges, they try to narrate it in a journey-like way. So the question that comes to my mind is that how these mental health influencers use storytelling in relation to mental health literacy.
Okay, so they
beside that example that you mentioned.
Yeah, so I have a problem with scope creep. In that whenever I start something, I think, let's do this, and we'll look at 500 posts, and then I find out what might be possible, and then we end up with a bit more. I am just going to show you the data set that we have. I know I'm leaping about the questions, I hope you don't mind. So our project overall has collected data that looks like this. So we work with TikTok in particular. I know we've got a question about why we focused on TikTok. I'm happy to explain that, but just to say for now, we have a researcher developer account with TikTok, and so my colleague Dr. Alex Christiansen, who does all the technological wizardry on everything, basically wrote the code and the script that gathered the data that we have here. So we have a corpus of 27,000 TikTok videos. Then we basically, because if you want to do multimodal analysis of that size data set, it requires human intervention, not just a machine to do it, if you're interested in the kinds of things that we were interested in, which you can't pick up with just a machine. And even I cannot analyse 27,000 videos. So we came down to a data set of about 390 videos that we analysed in detail, and then we took the comments from all of those videos, which is the 88,000 comments, which we then did further analysis on to be able to get a sense that on the screen what's helpful or harmful about those in terms of how people were talking about those videos. That will get you so far, it won't get you everywhere, and so we were interested in how we might evaluate that data. So we had two expert panel evaluations. One was with a group of mental health professionals, and one was with lived experience experts, and we gave them the best and the worst of each of our three categories of influencers, and they gave us a very rich qualitative discussion which helped us get a sense of what some of the helps and the benefits are from that data and where they saw potential risks arising. I, by background and training, I'm a corpus linguist, so that side of things is much more comfortable to me. I can look at lots of data and say the patterns that emerge. And if we had stopped there, we would have actually got only one tiny sense of what the issue is with this data. What we did do was, this time last year we were just starting our focus groups and interviews. So we went to 12 colleges and schools and charities across the Midlands, which we sampled in a way that gave us a representative sample. We did 18 focus groups and then 13 interviews with people whose voices we felt would not be heard within those focus groups, and we asked them about how they would respond to these different videos and how that sat within their own social media practices. And then we have tried to be as youth-centred as possible with this project, and so we took the insights that we got from both of those two work packages, and we worked with our Young People's Advisory Group on this project and held what we call a youth jury, which some of you in the room might be familiar with. I know that Mike is on the advisory board for this project, so I'm very grateful for him collaborating with David and bringing me here today to share this with you. So our youth jury was us sharing the insights that we had with another 22 young people from across the UK, saying, we want you to set the priorities from the insights that we've gained. What do you want us to take forward in terms of the outputs that we create from this? What do you want us to take to policymakers? What do you want us to take straight back to TikTok? What do you want us to take to government? And so we did that, and we have our insights, and now we are in the last crazy 6 months of this project, while we're trying to follow through on as much of that as possible, which includes some work around educational resources, which I presented at the National Literacy Trust Secondary Conference back in July. And from that, at that conference, I also asked the teachers in the room for their experiences and insights in terms of what challenges they were facing in terms of teaching mental health literacy, and all of that is informing what we're doing next. I know I've digressed from your question, I'm sorry, but I wanted to kind of like go, this is what we're drawing on in trying to get a really multi-layered understanding, not just of how these influencers talk, but actually what that means. And you asked me about how they tell stories. Basically, they tell stories in quite distinct ways across our 3 categories. So the experts are in this space telling you, here are 5 signs of high-functioning depression, or here are 3 signs of a narcissistic parent, and they use what we call explainers. Very typically, what they're doing is they're talking heads talking to camera. Let me tell you this. They might use some kind of prop in front of them to illustrate a particular kind of concept, but they're interested in narrating symptoms and effect, cause and effect, around particular kind of symptoms and what you then might do about it. They also were the only set in this particular data set, so we had 100 accounts in that data set I'm talking about there. We thought there would be lots of stitches and duets, so for those of you familiar with the ecology of TikTok, you'll know that a stitch and a duet is a way of bringing together one video and another in order to comment on it. We thought, aha, there will be lots of this in our data. Oh no, there was not, except for the experts who were taking other people's videos and then commenting on either to endorse it, to critique it, or to say, oh, well, let me offer you my services. It's a very commercially driven space. Even those who appear to be in it altruistically, ultimately, are often very commercialised. So that's what the experts do. The lived experience experts in our data, the influencers, they're doing something completely different. The kind of formats they tend to use are things like Day in the Life, Get Ready With Me. They stitch together scenes from their lives. They might do that in a kind of retrospective way that is mapping onto what in the literature are termed recovery narratives, or different types of recovery narrative. I know that term is problematic, but nonetheless it's in the literature, so just so you can see where that thread comes from. So they typically are kind of showing you, here I was, here I was, here I was, here I am now. And then some of them do that in a very micro version, where they typically indicating some kind of struggle that they're going through, and then some of them will use sound memes or intertextuality, typically to talk about things that are not really very tellable. So rather than tell themselves, what they'll do is use a meme or a sound meme that is recognisable within the in-group community or in-group audience there, to allude to difficulties that are going on. Our data goes across a whole range of mental health conditions, issues and challenges. When we've shown and discussed this with our young people's advisory groups, this is a partnership with the McPin Foundation. This project is overseen with 12 young people aged between 16 and 25. In some of our meetings with them, they said to me, Ruth, did you clean up this data for us so that you're trying to protect us? I'm like, no, I didn't. But I think influencers are a very particular category. So we don't get in our data the longer, dark tail that is underneath this, I think, for accounts that have got much smaller followings than these. But that's how the lived experience influencers are talking about. So very different style of narration. And our wellness influencers in the middle mimic what the experts say, and they mimic what the lived experience experts present. So they are visually making it look like it's their personal experience, but they're drawing on the explanatory frames of the experts, typically with no evidence other than their personal experience, typically drawing on pseudoscience significantly, often using visual formats like a watch me do this, so a kind of tutorial, where there may be some products that they are trying to promote to you, a kind of recipe that they're trying to show you, an activity that they're going to convince you to do. And they use green screens, so they will very often have like a backdrop of here's where you can buy this on an Amazon storefront.
But as you mentioned, it seems lots of misinformation over there, and what that it brings a lot of curiosity here is that how do young people consume these misinformation? How do they see even this type of content on a platform like TikTok?
So this is just to give you a sense of what some of the misinformation looks like. So the misinformation in TikTok looks like inaccurate information, typically about supplements. So this is a sketch of one of the most difficult videos in terms of potentially harmful, physically harmful videos. These are some quotes from the mental health professionals in that expert panel that I was talking about. In this video are totally at odds with what the science says. Well, not totally. Some of it is at odds with what the science says. Some of the supplements this particular influencer recommends have been they're not allowed in the UK. So this influencer is from America. So there's misinformation of this kind, which I guess is not really very surprising to you. There's also a lot of misinformation in terms of really, really reductive explanations in very short form that misrepresent, by being too short and too brief, what a particular mental health condition or diagnosis might entail. And then there's a really complicated space in which the affordances of TikTok don't help you think through what might be misleading or not misleading. But your question was about young people and how they respond to it.
How receptive are they towards these content?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that, so we talked to young people, as I said, we came to this point where got to this bit in our exploration of the data, we thought misinformation is the big problem. That's what we need to solve. And if you think that's the problem, then one way you might solve that problem is to do what the World Health Organization have done and what TikTok have done, which is to do things like create the FIDES network and to create the TikTok Clinician Creator Network, which is where you have health professionals come into that space and provide reliable content. It is a very logical and sensible thing to do, and it is a good thing to do, 100%. I'm very glad that this is being done. However, that actually doesn't take into account how young people respond to videos like this. So we showed a selection of videos to the young people that we held the focus groups with. We showed them one from a professional, one from a wellness influencer, and one from a lived experience expert. Now, all of these three have got different kinds of information that they're sharing. They're using different formats. They're offering different kinds of information and different kinds of support. In terms of how young people respond, they had perhaps this will be of no surprise to you, and it really should have been no surprise to me, but still, it took me aback a little bit. Just the extent to which they did not want to listen to professionals, to which that was, I would scroll past, don't just talk to me, you need to show me something. So some of it was around the visual formatting, that they just did not see that as engaging, and therefore they did not want to watch it. There was also a whole set of responses to the professionals that was really coloured by distrust and disillusionment with their past experiences of either seeking help and failing to get help. And there was also a really strong fatigue with top-down mental health communication and mental health campaigns that they'd experienced in school. So anything that felt like they were being talked to in an educational way, didn't want to listen to in the context of TikTok. So how people respond to these stories is a great question. We were looking only at TikTok. The reason that we looked at TikTok was our young people's advisory group, when we said to them, where should we look? Who should we look at? They gave us a whole set of recommendations of influencers, and they gave us a whole set of recommendation of sites, which would require me at least 10 years and about 10 times the amount of money that I actually had. So we narrowed it down to 3 sites, to Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And TikTok was the place where we actually found all of the influencers that were of interest to us. And very fortuitously to us, TikTok released this research at API at exactly the same time. So we said, let's do this, because it enabled us to legally and ethically collect the kind of scale of data that we've been able to look at here, and meet where we knew that young people were telling us that we were around. But TikTok as a site brings with it a whole set of platform beliefs. So it brings, for those of you who are in media studies, what are called platform imaginaries. So the beliefs that people bring to a site. So our young people in this data were bringing to this TikTok the belief that TikTok is for fun, it's for entertainment, it's where I go for decompression, it's where I go to distract myself, it is a thing that I might watch on the bus or just before I go to bed. It is not for intentional viewing, it's where I switch off, it is not where I switch on. And therefore, to try and put something that's serious into TikTok for them to watch intentionally, if they're coming as a viewer where this is coming incidentally to them through their For You page, in terms of their willingness to engage with it, if they were not deliberately seeking it out in the first instance, very unlikely to happen based on the responses that we had. In contrast to that, they were highly skeptical about the wellness influences. I'm tempted to say something slightly unprofessional at this point. Let me reframe it. They are very able to detect when something is being sold to them. And they're actually quite able to spot when something is pseudoscience, and therefore they shouldn't touch it. When it comes to fact-checking, they know what to do. They thought they knew what to do in terms of checking the credentials of content creators, which is part of how they respond to it. They thought they knew what they should do. In fact, so we said to them, so how would you trust it? They would tell us they didn't trust these different influencers. I said, well, how would you check it out to see if somebody was trustworthy or not? I go on the NHS website, which works for content. It 100% does not work if you want to check the credentials of a health practitioner, especially not if they're in the USA. So they thought they knew what they were doing, but actually they didn't know what they were doing. And honestly, it took us a really long time to do the investigative work to check. We checked the profiles of every single influencer in our data. 1 in 5 had credentials, not all of them were actual credentials. Some of them were fake, some of them were from sites that did not give them any authority to be speaking about mental health whatsoever. Okay, so how did they respond? They responded with some skepticism, but what they really liked, mostly, were the lived experience influencers who they deemed to be relatable. It was offering them something experiential, it was offering something them practical about that they could take into their own lives. Which is great, so long as the person was like them. But relatability most definitely has its limits. Our data set was, we tried to be representative, we didn't try, the way we gathered the data was through a series of hashtags and combined searches with different usernames. Our data set's primarily 80% female identifying. There's very little in terms of the influencers who identify as male in our data set. Where they're in the fitness space primarily, in the wellness space. Our young people had quite a lot to say, like, this person is not like me. This person is showing me something that we can't buy. This person is showing us, this person is not the same ethnicity as me. This person is different to me. I don't relate to this. That was really strong along gendered lines in a way that we didn't go out to explore, but came through it really, really strongly. So yes, a strong preference for relatability, but relatability is problematic. And these young people were finding it problematic as well. That's a really long answer to a short question.
No, that was really interesting. The question that I have right now is that you mentioned that the young people, the users, try to use TikTok and they scroll down, all of a sudden they find a video that they find relatable towards that. Okay, what's the criteria at play here? Why young people prioritize or pay attention to some videos over others? Because as you can see, there's a attention economy in place in here.
100%.
Some influencers become more famous. What do they do that young people are more attracted, more pay attention to those people in comparison to others?
So I think it varies for two things. One is that high visibility is not necessarily a good thing. So for most of the young people that we were talking to, I'm interested in influencers who are about the 10,000 mark Anything above that was of much less interest to them. They regarded that as too aspirational, out of touch, fake, commercially driven. And anything that was commercially driven was of no interest to them. Ironically, despite the fact that the reason most of them were following influencers in the first place was so they could get recommendations for fashion, beauty, lifestyle, things that they might actually then go and buy. But anything that was overtly selling to them and considered highly commercially driven was not attractive to them. So there's a really fine line between what was attractive to them was something that was visually engaging, something that appeared to be like them, or something they found funny or appealing. Yeah,
to make it more simplified for them, like in an entertaining way.
Entertainment, 100%. Entertainment, soothing, comfort. They were all the words that were associated with the consumption of the lived experience videos. This was the kind of thing that, so for example, one participant would describe it as the kind of thing she would watch before she would go to bed. Just watch it because it's really soothing just to watch that.
The question that I have, because I'm not a TikTok user, and I assume some people here are not a TikTok user. So in TikTok, if somebody, for example, trying to be a sponsor and sell you this, is there any tag or hashtag or something that says this video is sponsored?
Yeah, TikTok's terms and conditions, if you pay them, so even for the content that we are paying 3 influencers to create for us for this project will be declared as ads. So under TikTok's terms and conditions, you have to declare it.
So the question that I have you noticed, and this is, I think, a bit really interesting, have you noticed differences in how different age groups engage with mental health literacy on these platforms?
Well, we only talk to young people, so I can't really answer that very well, other than the perception of age is a relative thing, right? So we would talk to the 16 and 18-year-olds, and they would say, one of the things we asked them in the focus groups, we showed them 3 videos, and we said, who do you think this video is, the audience for this video is? So for the professional, they were like, this is general, this is for anybody, this is the kind of thing that when you first start using TikTok will just come up on your feed. For the lived experience experts, this is for young people like us, this is our age group. The wellness influencer, this is for old people. And so I say to them, so define old for me. Which could go anywhere between 19 and 25. Which, I told you, I'm a pterodactyl. But very often they were perceiving that wellness video as for millennials, for the kind of thing that they thought their mums would watch. Which in a way, I can see why they came to that conclusion. In our data, the wellness influencers and their discussions of mental health overlay right on top of hormone health for women and right on top of fitness discussions for men and other kinds of hormone health for men. So the diagnosis of particular kinds of hormone conditions and the difficulty of getting any kind of proper treatment for those hormone conditions by the time you're 25 or 26 is much more likely to be prevalent than it is when you're maybe 16. So their perception of, okay, so this video for this kind of person is for somebody who's old, millennial, I think is something to do with the kind of positioning of the type of content that was there. They were also, this particular video was about a nutrition-based approach to managing anxiety, and they were like, well, we couldn't buy that. This is the kind of thing that you would do once you've left home. This is the kind of thing that you could only do if you've actually got your own income coming in, which for them was like, that is, you are old to have that. So in terms of how we actually saw young people respond to it, one of the flaws in what we did, and if I had my time again, and more time and more money and a bigger research team, that I would do differently, was I would do another set of focus groups to 25-year-olds, so I'd go at the lower and upper end of our age categories, because the life experiences are very different between 16 and 25.
Okay.
So the honest answer is I don't know, but I know what the young people think.
The question that I have, like basically in these platforms, like when the environment is like that, how realistic is this to use social media storytelling to signpost somebody to actual need, the actual helping need? Is it even possible? Because it seems the algorithm, the environment is not going to favor that type of, storytelling.
Yeah. So I would say again, because we wanted to know from a general population as well as people who had some experience of mental health challenges, how they would respond, as well as those who have mental health challenges. There is a really big difference between somebody who goes seeking advice and looking for it and feeding the algorithm so they get more of that, for good or for ill, and somebody who might just encounter it because it's coming to them through some quirk of how TikTok's algorithm is promoting or not promoting different kinds of content. So you were asking how realistic is this? Is it a good thing to do?
Yeah, because I assume some people here maybe do research on social media, storytelling, or I know some people online use that for their own work. If the circumstances is like that, how realistic is this to use social media storytelling?
So I'm only talking about TikTok here. So consistently young people said to us time and time again, no, we go to YouTube, no, we go to YouTube, no, we go to YouTube, we would watch on YouTube. YouTube is for intentional viewing. So I think if you want to communicate in anything that's beyond a 60-second soundbite, TikTok is not the place to do it, right? We assume that we're going to meet young people where they're at, but we need to meet young people at and the places that they're using sites for certain kinds of things. I think it's exceptionally difficult to get past the platform beliefs that go hand in hand with TikTok, plus the affordances of TikTok, and use it as a really constructive way for health communication. I think it's much better that if you're going to do that, you then point the audience back through to YouTube and other sites of where reliable content can be consumed. It has got its place, but it's doing a certain kind of thing. So social media is really varied, the sites are really different, the kind of platform beliefs, platform imaginaries, the kind of affordances that are in different sites varies. The sites have got different ways of approaching online safety. They've got different ways that the frictions work in those different sites. So if I might digress one moment, I'm not digressing very far. Okay. So one of the things we asked them in the focus groups, we asked the young people, so what would you do with this? Would you scroll past, would you save, would you send it to a friend? Which we ended up getting a whole really rich discussion around the different design features of TikTok. And so they talked to us about how they saw the side effects of this. So they're kind of what they would call fast scrolling, watching things on double speed, really speedy consumption, and the preference for speed and efficiency going really bizarrely hand in hand with this desire for a quick fix entertainment, switch off, it's brain rot. And the effect of that being what the quote at the top says there, that what it produces a lot of impulsiveness rather than having to weigh it all, so a kind of reduction in critical thinking. And some of the way that the settings in TikTok work. So TikTok, I think, are a fascinating company in terms of they have actually got quite a lot of design features that would enable a young person to set some boundaries around what they want to see and what they don't want to see. But the design features are set up in such a way that it's actually quite hard to use them. So this quote that's on the bottom side of the screen is talking about the fact that when you use TikTok, the default is to have the sound on. So unless you change it, you're going to hear what is coming to you. To click not interested is not actually an intuitive thing to do. I don't know who in the room here uses TikTok. Do I have any TikTok users in the room?
Don't be shy.
Okay, so you will possibly be more informed than I was, because I say we gathered our data using the TikTok API. We didn't look at it as a user would look at it. We gathered just this big data set, and then we went and watched videos because we couldn't download the videos. If as a user you want to click the not interested button, you have to do one of two things. You either have to click the share button, which is bizarre because that's the opposite of not interested. Or you have to hold on the video and wait for the options to appear. So in terms of frictions, I'm guessing those of you in the room know about frictions in terms of design, those of you who are particularly into UX principles. This was new to me. So this idea about frictions being points at which you either have to slow down or take action and think harder. The things that you have to slow down and think harder to do are the things that you might protect yourself with in TikTok. And so the design of TikTok feeds a kind of passive consumption by its design principles, and you have to work really quite hard to go and look things up and then find out where they are in the app and then take multiple steps to actually enact that. What did you ask me? Why did I talk about this? I don't know.
I was like, how realistic is this?
How realistic?
Was it the last question? How realistic is this to use TikTok? I mean, not TikTok, because I was thinking about something else in between. But how realistic is this to use social media to post people for the help they need?
Oh, 100%.
But it seems the thing you said is like each platform has its own environment and atmosphere.
It does. And these are the features that for TikTok make it really hard to do kind of actually sensible communication about path there. From a professional point of view. That doesn't mean that kind of informal learning isn't happening. 100% informal learning is happening here. The question is, how aware is it that are the young people that informal learning is happening? Mm-hmm. So they would talk about, well, we're watching it, well, we're paying attention, but we're not really paying attention. But nonetheless, they were taking quite a lot of actually experiential knowledge. They had a really strong preference for experiential knowledge over academic knowledge. They got a strong preference for informal learning rather than formal learning. So in that sense, actually, TikTok is a great site if you want to provide some kind of supportive content. The trouble is, that is extraordinarily difficult to regulate, both from the point of view of what a young person might consume and how it might be produced and whether that should be picked up or not picked up, whose right it is to actually constrain that, help that. One of the things the young people said to us, in fact, I think they might be in this. No, it's not. Sorry, I'll go back. One of the things they said to us was that actually there were a lot of unintended negative consequences even of looking at good stuff. So it might include becoming more anxious about a particular condition, it might lead to self-diagnosis, which had its place, but for many of the young people the way they discussed it was quite negative. There was a risk of experiencing triggering content. What they really wanted was some guidance on how they should interpret this, and they wanted that to be peer-led, and they wanted it to be conversationally driven and youth-led. So we were talking about, what were we talking about? This is why I really should have had a slide deck and then we would have got some kind of coherence in it. Whether it's useful, yes, it's useful, but the really big challenge is actually what people do with that and how we help young people understand what they're looking at and whether it's right for them right now, because each individual's experience will be different and it's different at different times of the day, and so having a one-size-fits-all is 100% not going to work. Yeah. What we do need to do is equip young people well with the kind of media literacy skills so that they can ask good questions and understand what is happening to them at the moment that they are watching something, and therefore what they might need to do about it as a response.
Do you think a storytelling can help to promote more media literacy in that regard?
Yes.
That's a short answer. Yes. How can we do that?
So the way that we're tackling it is through a game-based learning.
Okay, interesting. That's my field. Okay.
Yeah. So at our youth jury, one of the things that the young people spoke about really compellingly was we want the opportunity to have good conversations that help us understand how we're consuming things, what we're consuming, and then what we need to do about it. And so we thought, we went back to our young people's supervisory group and said, how do you think we might do this? And they said, what about a game? And so what we have done is to actually co-design a card game, an educational card game, which it's basically designed based on the issues that we found in our data, and we have been testing it in schools. And hopefully we're going to release it. So I think that storytelling absolutely has its place. For me, in terms of the educational piece, that's got to be holistic. The schools piece for us is one part of a much too ambitious scope creep issue around like how does that happen in the home, how does that happen in outside spaces? What do we do with young people's stories? So we're actually, my colleagues, I don't think are ever going to work with me ever again, because we are also doing a policy webinar in January about youth-led approaches to communicating about mental health. We have worked with Care for the Family to produce resources for parents and carers. And we are in the process of a story collector project where we're producing an archive of stories from young people about their health experiences, so that they know that they're not alone in this. And we are also working with some TikTok clinician creators to create a social media campaign around men's mental health that bridges between fitness and mental health in particular. Yeah, but storytelling absolutely has its place, but it's not just one place, it's many places for many different audiences.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to ask, because to me the core of your research was TikTok. If you replace TikTok with a platform formerly known as Twitter or maybe YouTube or other, maybe the result and maybe the things that we get out of that research is going to be different.
Yeah, I think the core principles would be the same, in that I think the preference for hearing a story from somebody who's like me. Do you know, I shouldn't confess this to you, but I'm going to confess it to you. In the very first focus group we did with young people about, I said in the preparation for this grant application, I said to them, what do you think we should create from this? Should we do like a video? Because I was thinking about Paul Crawford's Ardman project. So I was saying, do you want us to create some videos? Do you want us to create educational resources? They said no. So we just want to hear stories from people like us. I could have saved myself a lot of work. So I think that preference for a story from somebody like me will stay the same regardless of what you're looking at. I think the turn to the visual and the importance of design features in terms of how that enables people to move through and think critically, I think that stays the same regardless of what you're looking at. And I think that in our current social economic moment, the challenges of navigating trust in a context where trust has been lost in so many different ways, I think that would also stay the same. So I think although that there would be specific platform imaginaries that would come into play depending on what you were looking at, and possibly, yes, you would find a better way of doing an educational content if you were to use something long form. I think the underpinning principles of peer-to-peer support, visually engaging content, being aware of using the design really in effective ways that enables critical thinking, and taking into account the broader social context, and all the variation that goes into that would remain the same.
The last question that I have, which is a broad question.
Oh, that's a dangerous thing to do.
So, what future holds for this field, social media storytelling? Whether it's the field of like studying the narratives and the stories that we share online, and whether like the capacity that these platforms, the things that they can offer us to share our stories in both sectors. What's the future?
Complicated, but as a researcher, I am committed to hope. I know that's probably a controversial thing to say in the current climate, but the reason that compels me to keep doing my work, and the reason that I think we should be compelled to keep doing our work, is that unless we work for change, where we can make change happen, unless we do that, we might as well all give up and go home, honestly. So I think the future of storytelling has to be critical and critically engaged, but seeking the good where we can make that happen. Even if that's small, you can do a lot with a small thing. So don't underestimate the power of a small story. If that improves the well-being for one person, and we all did that, I think the future is both complex but hopeful.
Thank you so much.